These true Walmart horror stories are stories or reports that people claim to have heard from others about strange, spooky, or weird encounters they had while working or visiting Walmart stores. In other words, these tales are frequently shared on websites that tell scary stories, social networking sites, and forums. Well, sit back and relax as we take you through these exciting but fearful stories that send shivers down your spine. Story 1. The Haunted Walmart. Beatrice is my name, and to this day, the events that transpired during my first night shift at a Chinese Walmart still echo in my dreams. Even though it was the days leading up to the holiday season, the store was unusually quiet, a striking contrast to the joyous, celebratory spirit that permeated the atmosphere outside. I was responsible for restocking shelves, which I imagined as a straightforward assignment, until I reached aisle 7. With its wide range of toys, aisle 7 ought to have been a place of joy and laughter. Nevertheless, it was the epicenter of strange phenomena that caused both the staff and the customers to talk in hushed tones. In the meantime, toys are discovered scattered about on their shelves, an unexplainable shiver that encompasses you as soon as you step there, and if you listen carefully, you can occasionally hear the sobs of a child. During that first night, when I was walking down the aisle, I had the impression that I was looking at a child standing some distance away from me. At odd hours, when there were not many adults around, I was concerned that the boy was probably lost, but when I approached him, he'd vanished without a trace. When another worker noticed my perplexity, they casually mentioned that it might be a dead child called Gabriel. At that moment, I was told that the shop had been totally consumed by fire a few years before. Apparently, a woman was currently engulfed in flames, and her son attempted to rescue her, but ended up suffocating in the smoke. There was a shadow cast on aisle 7 by this revelation. A haunting melancholy has taken the place of the joy that it had once contained. It seemed as though the haunting became more intense with each passing night. An unseen force caused toys to fly off shelves and head straight for me. The sound of Gabriel's cry became a regular background to my shift, and I noticed footprints in the dust that led nowhere. Even though my coworkers almost completely disregarded the paranormal event, I thought he was trying to communicate with me to get my attention. I decided to take up Gabriel's mission and find a way to assist him in finding peace. This decision was driven by a combination of dread and unwavering determination. A final reverberation of Gabriel's cries could be heard from aisle 7 as my shift drew to a close. After that, I realized that I could not turn away and that I had to assist this soul that had been lost, regardless of the cost. I returned to Walmart the following evening with a challenge to communicate with Gabriel. I stretched out to him in a way that went beyond the barriers that separated the living from the spirit, who was ensnared in sadness. I reached aisle 7 while carrying sacks of salt I had taken from the store's shelves. After researching the topic of interacting with spirits via the internet, I discovered that salt is an effective medium for bridging that gap. I made holes in the sacks and put the salt on the dark floor. The store was calmer than normal, and the fluorescent lights flickered above, generating long shadows that appeared to dance on the periphery of my field of view. Although my heart was beating rapidly, I managed to keep my voice steady as I called out to Gabriel. "Gabriel, if you can hear me, I'm here to assist you. Do you understand?" But no sound was heard. I repeated it again, and this time a toy truck sailed off the shelf to the right. Suddenly, the temperature of the air dropped, and the salt started to move around and take the shape of words in response to my request. It said, "Mom." Even though it was only one word, his response conveyed the depth of his need and the ambiguity of his mental state. As I came to terms with the extent of his desperation, tears began to fill up in my eyes. Gabriel had no idea that he was gone and was ensnared in a world in which he no longer had a place. "If you are with me, Gabriel, you are protected, and I want to assist you in finding rest." Again, the salt moved. This time, the grains moved with a specific goal. It was at that moment that I realized Gabriel was not only lost in the afterlife, but also the comprehension of his destiny. He continued his hunt for his mother, clinging to the unwavering belief that she would still be able to save him. During the course of our conversation, Gabriel disclosed his deepest pains. It was his mother who had presented him with a ring before the fire, and in his final moments when he was being consumed by smoke and flames, he had lost it. He desired the ring that belonged to his mother. But how? How do I get the ring? Where will I start the search? The revelation was an important event to consider. If the ring was the solution to Gabriel's unease, I will take full responsibility for locating it. Fascinated by my late-night endeavors, one of my co-workers revealed a piece of lore that had been lost. Reconstruction had been done on the store, and new flooring had been installed over the old one. If the ring was real, it was concealed beneath us. As a result of my newly discovered determination, I decided to seek assistance from my sympathetic co-workers. After the store had closed for the day, we started digging beneath the building with the tools we had taken from the hardware area. No matter how challenging the labor or unyielding the floor was, the idea that Gabriel's soul would finally find peace kept us going. We were finally successful in our endeavors. We discovered a ring buried beneath several layers of dust and debris, the metal of which was warm against the chilly earth. At the moment when I was holding it aloft, the store abruptly went into complete darkness, and the lights began to flicker out, leaving us in a void of shadows. After the lights were turned back on, the ring was no longer in my possession. Yet the awful and disturbing noise haunting aisle 7 was no longer there. Instead of it, we were surrounded by a sensation of warmth and comfort that was all about us. It would appear that the air was lighter, the shadows were receding, and the heavy feeling prevalent throughout the store was lifted. Suddenly, Gabriel's tears turned into laughing, and the joy was once again felt. Furthermore, aisle 7, which had previously been a source of sadness and anxiety, suddenly felt exactly the same as any other section of the supermarket. There is no sound of crying from the air, and the toys are lying in their respective locations without being touched by unseen hands. When dawn broke and threw its light through the store's front windows, I knew Gabriel had found his peace. The ring, which represented the love a mother has for her child, had liberated him, allowing his spirit to travel freely throughout the store. In what was once a horror scene, there was now a sense of tranquility, which is a monument to the power of compassion and determination. As I walked out into the morning light, I experienced a weight being lifted off of my shoulders. The haunting aisle 7 had ended, and with it, my anxiousness. Although Gabriel's story, a story about loss and yearning, had come to a conclusion, the voyage had completely altered me. It instilled in me the power of the human spirit and the unbreakable love that linked between individuals. Story 2, an insane customer. I'm sorry I can't tell you the location, but I work as a member of the loss prevention team at a nearby Walmart. I genuinely need the money, so I just don't want to lose my job. Because the loss prevention team is so small, the incident I'm about to tell was also featured in national media, and it is easy to link the entire situation to me. I may have stated that I needed my job, but that doesn't mean I love it. I actually still detest my job. Although I wouldn't say I like spying on individuals, that is sadly what my profession requires of me. They were aimlessly scanning the aisles, gazing at the CCTV, and keeping an eye out for anyone acting tense or moving too quickly. It can occasionally get really dull. Yes, there was occasionally some action. For example, some guys attempted to steal a DVD player or something similar. We got to play police officers for approximately 30 minutes until the real police arrived. Most of the time, it's just awful how some young, naive junkie sobbed in our office and told us she didn't want things to be this way. Yeah, neither did I, and nobody else did either. That's not even close to the whole story. You have no idea how irritating a black man can get on his own. He believes I'm stalking him through the store. Most times than I can count, I've been called racist. I'm not. I'm simply trying to perform this damn job, which I detest, but it still stinks. When working in loss prevention, you certainly see the worst in people, but the strangest thing I saw in my time at Walmart wasn't an armed robber or an addict. Rather, it was something completely different. This man walks through the doors one afternoon. and there was nothing very strange about him that would raise any red flags or cause us to suspect anything. When it was my turn to patrol the store, I diverted my attention from him for a little period and stopped staring at the cameras. I just kind of forget about the man. You make an effort to remember small details, but you interact with so many individuals that you don't remember any one person unless they strike you as really questionable. I spotted this guy again, the regular-looking dude, as I walked back towards the meat aisle, idly glancing at different people. He was standing there staring at all the steaks, chops, and cutlets that were stored in the refrigerator units. He was bald and wearing a blue shirt. Once more, nothing out of the ordinary, but this is when things turn strange. The guy's head sort of snapped at me as I was passing by. I recall that he had light-colored, nearly empty eyes. I said hi or whatever, just said hello, and he had this great broad smile on his face. There were no teeth left in his mouth. Instead, there were just 2 rows of diseased-looking gums that made me want to shrink away. But I just tried not to respond. I felt sorry for him. Perhaps he had misplaced his teeth or something, but I wouldn't pass judgment. I took a second look around the shop, observing as children became agitated and parents struggled to control their outbursts as singletons cut towards them. When I'm bored at work, I find myself thinking about how much I want to have children of my own, even if they are just rascals. But as I turned to head back towards the meat aisle, I noticed something strange right away. The bald man in the blue shirt continued to study the meat, but this time he was not merely glancing at it, he was staring at it. They were no longer moving around as they had been, giving the impression that perhaps one steak in particular had captured his attention. This time, he was locked in place, staring down into the refrigerator units with a lifeless expression in his eyes. He didn't even look up when I walked by him. I observed him for a good few seconds, and I don't even think he blinked. Instead of making my normal circle around the shop after passing this man, I stopped at the end of the meat aisle and observed him suspiciously out of the corner of my eye. He didn't move an inch. It resembled those street mimes quite a bit. Normal individuals fidget and shift their weight from foot to foot. They never truly stand motionless. It was very unsettling how motionless this guy looked, almost like a statue. I asked a co-worker over the radio if the bald man in the meat aisle was known to the loss prevention staff, but the answer was no. The person with whom I was working that day claimed to have never seen our toothless friend in his entire life. Thus, while I watched him and continued to listen to my friend on the radio, the man without teeth started to reach into the meat refrigerator and took out a big sirloin steak that was still wrapped in plastic. I began to feel foolish. Perhaps the man simply enjoys taking his time choosing a steak. After all, he is toothless, and perhaps he needs to get the proper sort for his dentures. Subsequently, he raises the steak to his nose and inhales deeply through the plastic bag. He hasn't taken anything, even though I can see he's plainly insane and that these kids are wild when I see them. In a technical sense, he was acting quite right. It's not exactly illegal to be a little strange at times. I knew it was my opportunity to intervene when he tore off the plastic covering. I didn't stop until I saw what he did with the meat. This toothless man stuffed the raw meat into his mouth. He tried to mush the thick piece of beef up with his bare gums while clenching his jaws. It was the exact opposite of what I thought a toothless guy would do, so I was shocked. Sincerely, I was afraid he would stuff it down his trousers or something. I had witnessed shoplifters taking more bizarre items and concealing them in strange locations, but my goodness, to watch him really put the steak past his lips and begin chewing, I had never seen something so strange as that. The sounds he made, like a kind of moaning or something, like he was getting off trying to swallow that piece of raw steak entirely, scared the living daylights out of me. His eyes began rolling back into their sockets, and his cheeks began to cave in as he tried to suck all the fluids out of the raw piece of flesh. Meanwhile, his hands were shoving more and more of it into his mouth. As I turned the curve in the aisle, I watched him spit the meat out while panting and struggling for breath. I was truly afraid that he would notice me as the only person who had seen what he had just done. He rapidly made his way out of the meat aisle and headed for the main exit while I watched in horror having somehow managed to freak myself out. It was my responsibility to stop him, as I know I should have. But as Walmart staff, we are taught to stay away from those who appear to be aggressive or insane, and to let the police officers handle matters. All of me wanted to know why he had done something so disgusting as that. Was it the reason his teeth had fallen out? Was he really that bad of a person to be trusted with his own teeth? After arresting the man, the police discovered that he was an untreated mental patient. He most likely lost his teeth as a result of basic neglect. Well, that's what they believed the situation to be. This individual, whatever the problem, had a history of retail theft convictions. It was his fourth offense, according to the police officer we spoke with, and he was probably going to be sent to federal jail for reoffending. Regardless of how disgusting or depressing it is to see a poor elderly man going insane in that way, this was undoubtedly the strangest thing that had ever happened to me while I was employed at Walmart. Story 3. Never stay at a Walmart overnight. It's possible that some of you are aware of the Walmart challenge. You know, the one where people attempt to spend the night at Walmart without being discovered. I am here to inform you that this challenge is riskier than you imagined. I nearly died the last time I stayed behind at a Walmart. It was simply another Thursday night at first. I recently received a promotion to assistant manager. I won't lie, I was proud of it. It seemed like a middle finger to everyone who claimed I wouldn't accomplish too much, coming from a high school dropout like me. I offered to remain behind and lock up since I wanted to treat my newfound obligations with seriousness. It also allowed me time to reflect and make plans for what to do next. The cost of education was high, so each additional hour I worked here brought me one step closer to returning to a classroom. I had to finish school in order to disprove people. Before long, I was the only person still inside the shop. I proceeded to the rear and initiated an inventory review. Counting boxes of excess cereal and mismatched socks was tedious labor, but it was strangely consoling. My territory was the stockroom. This was my chance to manage, organize, and make sense of the chaos. Even though it was insignificant, I cared about it. I owned it. After verifying the inventory was finished, I decided to perform one more sweep of the store, protocol and everything. When I reached the main floor, the store was completely silent. I had to use a torch to navigate because the lights had been turned off. I began walking down the first aisle, mentally checking things off. It felt strange to browse the Walmart aisles after business hours. It was just me and the shelves. I walked inside the toy aisle while heading to the back of the store to complete a last loop. But as I continued to walk, I became increasingly aware that something wasn't quite right. The store appeared to be opening up in front of me. There was always the back wall just out of reach. It appeared as though I hadn't moved at all when I glanced behind me. In the distance, I could make out the doors. I am stranded in the center of this Walmart. I reasoned that I had to be exhausted from my shift that day. I accelerated my speed. You know how that feels, don't you? Locations always seem larger when the crowd has dispersed. However, the aisle's terminus never materialized. Rather, it seemed as though I was strolling on a treadmill. I kept seeing the same superhero characters in a never-ending cycle. I began to perspire, and it wasn't because I was pretending to run or work out. I had the impression that something was seriously off in this situation. The identical white Walmart sign with the word toys hung above me. I was still a long way from the back wall. The doors were still in the same location as I turned to look behind me. I didn't seem to have moved at all. Startled, I took a step back and ran into a solid wall. It wasn't there a moment ago, I swear. When I last glanced, it was at least a few feet further ahead of me. However, I was also just relieved to have arrived at the end of the aisle. I inhaled deeply. All I had to do was go to the front and exit this place. It wasn't too far from the front doors. I assured myself that I should be able to get there quickly. However, the Walmart appeared to expand once again as I moved in the direction of the doors. The farther I moved towards the entryway, the more it appeared to be moving away from me. I came to a stop, breathing more rapidly. I began to feel lightheaded. I closed my eyes, thinking that everything would return to normal when I opened them. However, while re-examining the storefront, I noticed that the doors had vanished. Rather, there was a brand new wall of soda-filled display shelves just in front of me. I was confined. All right, I had to find out where I was. I had a wall behind me. There was another wall in front of me. The soda shelf stretched out to meet another wall when I turned to look to my left. There's no way out. I startled myself a little by turning to my right. Rather than seeing additional Walmart shelves, I was shown a hallway I had never seen before. It appeared to have been carved into the wall its entire existence. It appeared to be the rear chambers of an office building. It featured yellow wall art and simple white flooring. Periodically, dim fluorescent bulbs flickered overhead. Just before Walmart's linoleum tiling transformed into carpet, the soda shelves came to an end. I just stood there staring for a moment. The hallway appeared very typical, but it felt wrong, like it shouldn't be there. Even just glancing at it made me nauseous. I tried to ignore it by turning my head aside. I started jogging down a random aisle without thinking. I had no idea where I was heading or how to get back to the exit. I had a gut feeling that I had to leave that yellow hallway. I ran without realizing where I was headed. Far ahead was too dark to see. Still, the aisle continued on, and the shelves appeared to be rising higher on both sides of me. Alternatively, perhaps the ceiling was dropping. Really, I wasn't sure. Now, though, the shelves were scraping the ceiling. It felt more and more like I was traveling through a tunnel as I continued down this aisle. It seemed as though Walmart had condensed into just one alley. I thought, it feels like I'm in a hallway, and I hesitated after that. I noticed that I was now standing on the red carpet as I looked down. Anticipating to view the remainder of the store, I turned around. Rather, all that was left was a blank wall with faded yellow wallpaper. The words, "Keep walking," were written in black Sharpie on the wall. I took a look around. On both sides of me, there were still shelves stocked with items. Walmart seemed to have transformed into the peculiar office hallway I observed. I looked over the shelves to see what I might utilize. These days, they're an odd assortment of sporadic store finds. Towels, hair dryers, Barbies, carrots, and other objects. I kept looking till I saw a rucksack. I had no idea where I was or how long I would be in this place. Purchasing goods in bulk looked like a wise move. I grabbed whatever food I could find and a few bottles of water. I took a brief break and carried on walking. Even with a torch, I was unable to see that far ahead of me. However, I did observe that the shelves soon became empty. Before long, the hallway was lined with nothing but barren metal racks. I proceeded till I noticed a doorway on my right. It opened into a large space that looked nothing like any area I was familiar with in the business. The room's ceiling to floor was supported by a disorganized system of pillars. In one corner, a few Walmart shelves were stacked high. Everything else in the room was vacant. On each of its walls, I noticed a few doors. While some led to what appeared to be larger rooms, the majority led back into separate yellow halls. On the wall nearest to me, I noticed another statement spray-painted. It said, "Always choose the hallways," but the lettering appeared to have been smeared or attempted to be erased. I didn't know how to interpret it. However, the author appeared to be far more knowledgeable about this location than I was. I decided to go through the closest door to a different hallway. I quickly discovered a first aid kit fixed on the wall. I opened it, expecting to see something helpful, but nothing was there. There wasn't much in the box. A tiny roll of bandages was all that was left, together with an empty disinfection bottle and a few blood-stained cotton balls. There was a large dark stain on the floor next to the kit and a trail of blood down the hallway. I started to worry about the others after seeing all of it. People have obviously been precisely where I was. However, where were they? How much time had they spent in this place? I chose to pursue the trail of blood. Though it wasn't much of a plan, it was nevertheless an attempt. At least it indicated that someone else was present. There was a possibility that we could escape this place if I could locate the others. I could find out more about what was going on, at minimum. Music that sounded oddly pleasant started to play as I kept walking. The sound was grating on the ears, akin to damaged lift music. I followed the song out of curiosity and discovered another doorway. It ended up being simply another deserted office block, except there was a tiny stage in the middle. A man wearing a mascot outfit was hunched over something on that stage. However, since the man in the suit was not sporting the headpiece, I was clueless as to what it was meant to be. Rather, I was only able to see the back of his head. The garment had a tail that hung off the rear and was covered in fading gray fur. "Hi!" I approached him and yelled out. All I could feel was relief at finding someone else. I had to investigate what was happening. The man stood up straight. I then realized something wasn't quite right. I felt sick because of the way his neck was twisted and appeared broken. He had too pale skin. I realized that I was speaking with a mummified corpse as he turned around. Although his skin was parched, he had a tube that connected his lips to the inside of the suit. The tube sent forth a lifelike pulse. Then the man's mouth opened, and the brown tube shot in my direction. And I swerved around it and started running down the corridor. The mascot followed me, echoing with its song. Every few steps, my balance was upset by something striking my rucksack with force. That tube was still pursuing me and attempting to seize me. I could see a row of doors ahead. I darted into the first one I came to without a second thought. There was a heap of empty metal racks in one area. I just ran for that pile and hid, not pausing to ponder. I peered out and saw that same figure enter the space and slowly circle around, seemingly in quest of something. Its connecting tube slithered through the air as if it had a mind of its own. I knew that the man in the suit could still see me, even though it was obvious that he was dead. The creature twisted, and his head flopped. And as it did, I noticed that the Walmart logo was printed on the front of the mascot. I waited till the mascot eventually vanished. Up until the strange sound that followed it also went away, I remained motionless. Once it was gone for good, I looked around and saw one other way out. It appeared to go to another room. I was aware that I was supposed to stay in the hallways, but the mascot moved elsewhere. I had absolutely no desire to run into that creature once more. I decided to take my chances by going through the other exit. With all my might, I dashed to the opposite exit. Rising to my feet, I took stock of my surroundings. The yellow hallway was the same, but the walls here bore more writing. I entered the next room, which was completely dark. I was unable to discern anything. I stepped forward cautiously, and my foot hooked on something. I got my balance back before I fell on my ass. I searched for my torch, unsure of what I had slipped on. I gestured at the floor, and there was a bloody Walmart vest under my foot. I rotated the torch in an attempt to gain a clearer picture of my location. It was a small, narrow room. More of the Walmart mascots were put throughout the walls. I shined my laser across all of them. Every costume was unique. One had spotty fur and was pink, while the other had dull orange fur with tiny feathers all over it. However, they were all connected by one thing: a vivid Walmart emblem on their stomachs. A few of the outfits were dead and drooped, their material sagging. Others, however, included mummified corpses. Through the ripped or unzipped portions of their clothing, their parched flesh was visible. A doorway stood on the other side of the space. It opened out to a corridor as far as I could see from where I stood. However, the area was so small that one could hardly move about it without running into the mascots. I navigated my way through carefully. I could see ahead by using my light. However, one of the outfits appeared to quiver whenever the light struck it. I turned off my torch quickly, returning the room to complete darkness. I didn't want to cause any offense by doing those things. I maintained my focus on the exit located on the opposite side, while making my way through the blackness. Just a few more steps. I could hear light rustling sounds all around me, similar to fabrics rubbing against one another. But right now, I can't take the chance of freaking out. I was nearly at the door, only a few more feet. Something squishy felt under my shoe then. It squirmed beneath me, letting out a high-pitched shriek. It had to be one of those tube things. My heart raced. I felt it suddenly wrap around my shoe and pull firmly. Once more, the lift music began. This time, it was louder. A few more tunes then filled the room. I came to understand that such things are called to each other through music. The tube around my foot got tighter as the various songs mixed and muddled together. I ran away from it. I ran forward with everything I had. I removed my shoe and moved away from the floored tube as I did this. But the mascot things began to come to life, all around me. Their attempts to grasp me were sensed by the brush of their fur. I shoved through in the direction of the door. I was abruptly dragged backward just as I was about to escape. One had snagged hold of my rucksack. I squirmed and tried to free myself. I was pulled to the ground and choked on mildew and dust. A sizable green mascot appears to be moving out of the corner of my eye in front of the exit. There was a woman's corpse inside. I contorted until I was able to remove my rucksack. I threw myself at the green mascot without thinking. When we landed in the corridor, the woman's head flopped back and forth. I shot back up onto my feet and took off running. I ran on, gasping for air. I wandered along each hallway, not really sure where I was going. I would occasionally walk by a room, and one of those mascot figures was lurking there in the dark. I picked up on this quickly. Stay in the hallways and avoid the rooms. The hallways appeared to go on forever. I was unwilling to stop, though. I ran till at last my eyes fell upon something inscribed on the wall. One more message. This one has the words Walmart hallway with a right pointing arrow. Even so, it was difficult to read because the message had been highlighted in red Sharpie, simply spoken repeatedly, as though trying to hide it. There were prints of blood to the right of the message. I wasn't going to break the rules again after what happened in the blood chamber. I reasoned that the best course of action for me would be to track out the person writing the remarks on the wall. I decided to follow this one as well. I entered the doorway that the arrow indicated and discovered that I was in a different hallway. Again, Walmart shelves lined the walls this time. However, these dust-covered shelves were vacant. Occasionally, I would come upon an odd object like a broken cup or a rubber duck. However, nothing genuinely helpful was present. I pondered the duration since the message was composed. Perhaps there had been a time when the shelves were filled, but now they were picked clean. What became of those individuals? Did they manage to escape or... Well, I didn't want to consider the possibility. I discovered another statement written on the wall and continued to travel, attempting to figure out where I was. This one appeared to have been authored by a separate author. With an arrow pointing to the door next to it, it said, "Exit here." Was this, at last, my ticket out? This portal opened into a hallway unlike any other. The floor was the same glossy plastic you'd find in a high school gym, and the walls were white. The passageway was flanked by metal doors on each side. Then there was all of the blood. It was all over the hall. Some of the bloodstains were brilliant red, but the majority were ancient and had become brown. New. I nearly passed out because of how strongly the stench of it permeated the air. I entered cautiously because the floor was slick. At the conclusion, the hallway veered to the left. The first metal door I attempted to enter was locked. As I walked, I examined every door, but they were all securely shut. Many of them also had blood on them. A blue tent that was erected at the end of the hallway unexpectedly caught my attention when I reached the end and turned left. A man was sitting in front of it, devouring a can of sardines as though it were the greatest thing he had eaten in a long time. He had a gritty appearance. His hair was shaggy and matted, and his clothes appeared to have been put together using whatever was available. When he spotted me, the guy virtually leaped to his feet. It's unbelievable, someone else. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he said, "I've been waiting for this for so long." I said, "Hey, I'm Filson," attempting not to let the shock of seeing someone else get to my voice. It's not like the individuals I was hoping to find here. How much time had he spent inside? As he described himself, I looked at his temporary residence. Marvel Clem, that's my name. Man, I have no idea how long I've been confined to this location. I was locking up a Walmart in the UK one moment, and then, suddenly, here I was. "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you came." "UK?" That caught me off guard. I was a long way from it. "I worked at a Walmart in Germany." As he spoke, I kept my eyes on him. He appeared pale and wobbly. He also appeared extremely skinny, as though he hadn't eaten or seen the light in a very long time. He informed me that he had been here for some time and was essentially looking around for leftovers. "Marvel, what year did you get lost?" I inquired. He was uneasy, as though he was having trouble recalling the response. 1998, I believe. However, that is now irrelevant. "It's my moment," he declared. "Ned." But even as Marvel approached me, there was something about his appearance that unnerved me. He was undoubtedly withholding something from me. "Hey, have you been the one leaving those messages on the walls?" I stepped back, attempting to understand him as I asked. He was invading my personal space a bit too much. Marvel hesitates a bit too long and then nods. "Yes, that was me. Merely attempting to assist," he stated. It didn't sound very plausible. Those communications were not from him by any means. "What about all the blood in the hallway back there? What does that have to do with?" I inquired. Marvel suddenly added, "Don't worry about that," as his expression altered. "It's only a step in the process of locating the exit." Then he lunged at me before I could respond. In his hand, a Swiss Army knife gleamed. I was hardly able to dodge. He continued chasing after me as I staggered back a few paces. He urged me to help him leave, looking frantic. "You must assist me in leaving. Someone has to give blood here to open the exit, but it can't be their own. I've spent much too much time stuck here. I have to go now," he declared. He revealed to me a large scar on his abdomen. "Observe this. When the last person went, I understood." I attempted to move out of the way when he attempted to stab me once more, but I was not fast enough. My cheek was scarred by the knife. Marvel briefly appeared to be upset. His voice broke as he added, "I don't want to hurt you, but it's the only way out." Marvel went after me once more, and we both went down. His strength surprised me as he quickly flipped me over and restrained me. "I'm not going to murder you," he continued. "I just need a little blood," and glided the knife carefully across my chest. The cut was wide, but not very deep. I screamed at the hurt. With everything I had, I forced him away from me. I turned us over, so now I was the one keeping him from moving. Marvel's eyes widened in disbelief, though. He glanced down, and I followed suit. He had dropped the knife from his grasp. Blood was beginning to seep into his shirt from the object lodged in his stomach. In a panic, I attempted to stop the bleeding by applying pressure, but it was unsuccessful. The blood continued to flow, surrounding us in a pool. Then I heard footsteps coming from the hallway as doors opened and locked. Marvel gave me a sorrowful, sympathetic expression as he stared at me. He muttered, "I just wanted to see the sun again." Determined not to let Marvel fall behind, I attempted to hoist him up. I told him, "We're heading out together." I did the best I could to get him up and began pulling him in the direction of one of the open doors. However, I could hear doors behind us slamming shut, one by one. "They closed down quickly. You have to go quickly," he said, struggling to maintain his voice. He pleaded, "Just leave me behind." "Stop talking. Please stop talking. I lost my temper. After you cut me with a knife, you have no right to dictate to me. Together, we're leaving here. I'm not going to abandon you," I declared. He began to nod off, and I could tell he was no longer paying attention. One of the doors was about to close when I got to it. I doubted that we would make it in time. I recalled Marvel's words to open the doors. Blood was required. If that's what it takes, I pondered. I took the knife, took a moment to think, and then made a deep cut on my arm. Dripping onto the floor, blood started to flow. That seems to be the solution. Using my good shoulder, I forced open the door, and we crashed out into an abandoned storage area. I noticed that the metal door we had just passed through was beginning to fade from the corner of my eye. That didn't matter, though. Marvel and I were both leaking blood onto the ground. Through a door across the room, a small amount of light showed. Gradually it opened, and a young man entered wearing a Walmart uniform. When he saw us bleeding on the ground, he appeared shocked. "He needs an ambulance." Marvel was the target of my yell. We were both rapidly losing strength, I could tell. However, I was able to give him a back pat before collapsing, saying, "Marvel, all you needed to escape was a willing friend." I awoke to find myself in a hospital bed next to a machine that was beeping continuously. I was perplexed and trying to recall how I had gotten there. Marvel was then visible to me as she slept in the bed next to mine. We were in a hospital in Finland, I discovered when a nurse walked in. I had been absent for 5 months, she informed me. For 5 months? The whole thing seemed to take hours. I spoke with the nurses and physicians for a while in an attempt to determine what had happened to us. They informed me that both of us would require a vitamin drip and would require a prolonged stay in the hospital. In addition to being extremely dehydrated, I had lost almost 30 pounds. Why wouldn't I now? When I went 5 months without eating or drinking anything, they said we were fortunate. We could have starved to death with just a bit more. Marvel was still not feeling well. Even though I still had a lot of questions, I knew I had to warn others. Avoid spending the night at Walmart at all costs. It was riskier than I had anticipated. Overall, I was happy to be alive and able to share my experience. Story 4, The Invisible Threads. The call had come in describing a standard hostage situation, and when I entered the dimly lit, expansive Walmart in Brazil, the atmosphere was charged with tension, a sharp contrast to the normal bustle of everyday business. Unexpectedly, I decided against quitting my job while I was driving to work because the suspect's brief was anything but ordinary. 3 individuals had been shot dead, and multiple hostages had been grabbed by a lady who claimed that invisible forces controlled the destiny of those within. She arrived carrying homemade bombs and improvised weapons, demanding that the president admit that their lives were being controlled by unseen forces and that they lacked free will. I approached the store warily. It appeared to be in disarray, similar to what happened after a hurricane. It took me over 10 minutes of walking to get to the counter where she and the hostages were holed up. The woman was Dr. Victoria Stone, a name that was today synonymous with chaos, yet had formerly been connected to cutting-edge theoretical physics. She was laughing, crying, talking to herself, and wheezing like a dog. Then a gunshot was fired abruptly into the air. She yelled out, "Welcome, negotiator," as though she had been waiting for me since her form had emerged from the shadows. Although she wasn't as big as I thought she would be, the firearms she was holding were definitely real and very lethal. I made my introduction while maintaining a steady tone. "Dr. Stone, let's discuss how we may settle this amicably." She let out a laugh. "Calm?" she said. "The world will soon realize that being in control is just a state of mind and there is no peace in it." I had to listen to her carefully and convince her that I could support her because she had a lot to say. She gave a talk about the nature of reality, control, and the unfinished experiments that had been bothering her. Victoria was clearly a genius on the verge of greatness, not merely intelligent. Her beliefs that she might unravel her destiny by revealing to others the reality of their deception were based on her views, which were formerly highly regarded in the scholarly community. Her theory was proven by the mayhem she created all around us. There were overturned shelves, bullet-marked messages, hostages placed in strategic locations, and motion sensors installed all throughout the business. 2 others would be shot by handmade sensor-triggered guns if the first attempted to flee. To her, they were all lab rats. "Gaze around you," she said, pointing to the mayhem. "This is not an act of randomness, rather it is a well-planned experiment." And that's when it dawned on me that I was involved as well. Her intention was for me to be here for the negotiation. She wanted to demonstrate that she was in control of this for those who thought unseen threads ruled the planet. There had never been greater stakes. I wasn't merely trying to save the host's life. I was battling to show that we weren't just pawns in her insane scheme. Although unstable, her movements were predictable. She was obviously one step ahead of everyone else, reading moves in a game that only she truly understood. Her utterances oscillated between lucidity and madness while we were conversing. She described her study, including tests that made it difficult to distinguish between reality and perception, and physics and philosophy. In her great scheme, the hostages were just pieces of chess. She claimed to be in charge of them and wanted everyone to see the invisible thread, but there was more to her gaze than just a wish to enlighten. She was pleading for approval, for someone to recognize her brilliance. When I realized this, I changed my strategy and approached her as a peer to a scientist, rather than as a negotiator to a hostage taker. I confronted her findings and questioned her beliefs, and in the process, I noticed the first hint of doubt appear on her face. Although it was a minor triumph, it revealed a weakness in the mental barrier she had constructed. Trying to talk to the person behind the psychosis, I found myself saying, "I'm not your enemy, Victoria," using her first name, "but this isn't the way to support your views." Her abrupt and harsh laughing broke the tension. "You believe that this is a demonstration to the outside world. I want to prove something to myself with this." At that point, the focus of the game shifted from the unseen threads of power to a woman attempting to regain her authority. I realized that this was my opportunity, my vulnerability, and the tactic I had been looking for. I started to carefully break down the universe she had created at the store by pointing out the contradictions between what she was doing and what she believed to be true. Her eyes lost their fervor slowly, giving way to perplexity and finally realization. Victoria Stone appeared defeated for the first time since the start of the standoff, when the weapons were dropped and her posture sagged. That was when the true fight was won, in her hour of weakness. After waiting for my signal, the SWAT team stepped in to secure the business and make sure everyone inside was safe. Eventually, Dr. Victoria Stone was placed under arrest. Victoria shrieked at the top of her lungs and flung her hands around as 4 guys dragged her away as the hostages were carried outside to the hug of waiting loved ones. Just as the insane woman was being escorted past me, the store lights flickered back to normal. She paused, met my eyes, grinned, and said, "I broke the threads, so I will be put down, but they don't know that you broke them too." I couldn't figure out what she meant when she said it. That's when I realized, had she not planned this entire thing, I would have immediately resigned from my position. The invisible threads desired that of me, but I reversed my destiny and discovered her theory, thanks to her terrible game. The truth of the invisible thread she talked of remained elusive, twisted in the crossroads of science, belief, and the unfathomable depths of the human mind. But I felt like I had a lot more work ahead of me. Because of her, I broke the invisible threads too. Hope you enjoyed these stories. If you do, please hit the comment on the story you'd like to see next. Also, don't forget to check out any of our videos displayed on your screen with just a click for more intriguing horror stories from this channel. See you in our next video.